The Windrush generation is an untold story in Wolverhampton. Like my parents' generation, part of the Windrush generation, they were invited and they came here between the period from 1948 right up to the 70s and even up to the early 80s. And even though we celebrate now National Windrush Day as a result of some of the campaigning I've been involved with along with other people, reflecting the Empire Windrush ship which docked in Tilbury on the 22nd of June 1948. Um, Majority, tens of thousands of people that came from the Caribbean that settled in places like Wolverhampton came particularly in the 50s and 60s and 70s as well. A lot of the people from Wolverhampton, from Windrush generation, uh, reflect diversity of the Caribbean, but vast majority, I would say, 90% of them come from Jamaica, mainly from the parishes of Westmoreland, Hanover, and St James. But also people came from St Elizabeth, Kingston, and St Catherine as well. And that generation, which I'm very proud to be a child of, um, have made a significant contribution to Wolverhampton. They worked in all the major industries at the time, in manufacturing, worked in the coal mines, worked in light engineering, on the buses, worked in education, housing, and in all aspects which was required because after the Second World War, Britain was devastated, needed labour, and the 1948 Nationality Act allowed them to come because that was the mother country, and also they believed that the streets were paved with gold of opportunities as well. The relationship between the Windrush generation and Britain goes back not just simply to 1948, it goes back to the transatlantic slave trade. That trade, the horrid trade, which 400 years ago basically illegally transported forcibly my ancestors from Africa, and that story is a story of a lot of people of Caribbean heritage that their ancestors were forcibly removed, treated as property and chattel, forced to work on the various plantations, the sugar plantations, cotton plantations uh, in the Caribbean, and some of them actually went to as far as South America and North America as well. That trade made significant amounts of money and profits for those people that were involved in that enterprise. So much so that the profits that were made were reinvested in, which led to the creation of the Industrial Revolution, which as in Wolverhampton's part of the Black Country was quite significant in terms of building the canals and all the infrastructure that helped facilitate the growth of Britain as a fifth nation in terms of wealth. And it wasn't ironically until 2015 that we as taxpayers, and particularly the Windrush generation, paid off the debt for all those people that got compensation in 1833 as a result of the ending of the slave trade and then of slavery. And and that money, the wealth has been recirculated. It's been estimated by National Trust that a third of all their properties in Britain has a link with the slave trade in terms of wealth that was created and the beneficiaries of those families as well.
They called us, to help to rebuild the country after the war. We sacrificed and we came here and thought we would have had a good reception, but we didn't get it that way. We have to beseech and beg and do everything to get places to stop. There were places when you go and you knock the door and they look on you, no room for you. They don't want no blacks and they don't want no Irish. Those days, I don't know why. Because the Irish are white people, so I don't know why. Well, however, I didn't moan a lot. I stood my ground and I said, I'm going to stay put and I'm going to work hard and send down my roots and let the indigenous population know that I have stamina in me. I can excel if I want to. So I pick up courage and start to do my thing.
1969, at the time it seems like my life had ended because I didn't really want to come. I wanted to stop on at school. Strange back then. I wanted to stop on at school and finish my education, but as a child I didn't really have too much of a say in it. That's what my parents wanted, so my grandparents had to adhere, and so in 1969, reluctantly, I came to England. What I can remember of the journey, it was mixed really, because we left Norman Washington Airport at, I think it was 12 o'clock on a Saturday, and because of the time difference, it was really strange because we left in broad daylight, and partway through the journey, obviously it was night, and then we arrived here and it was night again. And I thought it was really sort of strange, we was flying for so long. I came to England and it was pitch dark when I landed at Manchester Airport.
One of the things when we were growing up, my mother used to say, wherever you go, live right with people. And I'm not saying that the prejudice is not there, but they don't show it to me. So I don't build on it. But I know there is prejudice.
Yeah.
One of the things that I know the prejudice is, if you're a white person working on the same job, you wouldn't get the same amount of money. They would give you less. And one day, we were working on this job and somebody said what they got. No, I'm not interested to know what the other person got. But I said, she don't work as hard as me. How is it she get more? And I sneak in the office and I ask, what's going on? Sometimes it's good to open your mouth. And they said, because they are doing higher rates. So I said, how is it they're getting higher rates than me and we're doing the same thing? Because I wasn't trained to do machine work. And afterward, it turns around that whatever job they gave me, they would say to me, don't let nobody see your pay slip. So, at that point, it pays for me. So I can't say, that I had a bad time with white people.
Many Rivers to Cross is an interesting song. It was written by Jimmy Cliff, famous international reggae artist. But he wrote that song, and that was based off his observations when he was touring the West Midlands in 1968, the same year that Enoch Powell made his speech, Rivers of Blood. That his speech talked about a Britain where the black man would take the upper hand of white man, and there would be civil violence and destruction. That never happened. But what the speech did do was it led to an increased intolerance of my parents' generation and further reinforced the experience of discrimination known as a colour bar, where people were discriminated in terms of job opportunities, discriminated in terms of housing, discriminated in terms of stop and search and the experiences that they had, and the day-to-day humiliation of being of racist language used against them. That also had an impact also on my generation, firstborn generation that were born in Wolverhampton in the 60s and 70s, because we faced similar discrimination in terms of being classed as educational subnormal, being treated again in terms of trying to get jobs, employment, and education as well. In the song Many Rivers to Cross, Jimmy Cliff talked about the white cliffs of Dover, almost like equivalent of the streets being paved with gold. and also one of aspirational hope for the Windrush generation. The Windrush generation had a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, 15-year plan. Some of them did migrate back to the Caribbean, but a majority of them stayed to have a life here so they could raise their families and contribute to the local community in Wolverhampton as well. And that's why this project, the BME project, is quite important, because it's about celebrating oral histories of that generation, which is really critical and really important. And it wasn't until the Windrush scandal that took place in 2018, that's when the great British public understood why we came here, why we contributed to Britain, and our value to society. It took a scandal and for that to be exposed, and it led to a local person, Paulette Wilson, well known in Wolverhampton, a Windrush campaigner, for her to hear her story, and sadly her loss to her family as well.
The first night I came up to Wolverhampton, I had a few friends up at a place called Langley Road in Maryhill here. I went there, I thought they could put me up, but after they gave me a light meal, the manager came around and said, well, he can eat, but he can't sleep here. Just imagine, I'm a total stranger. So the men took me to another place and I got put up the night. And so we wouldn't have done that to an English person if he comes to Jamaica. We would leave our bed to give him.
I think it was about 8 of them were living at in an accommodation at down Penfield. And this woman that accommodated them, I think she's an Irish background. I think it's about 8 to 12. And part of their, but they pay for their accommodation involves they having breakfast. They'll have breakfast in the morning, toast, button, and cups, mugs of tea and everything will be laid out on the big table, and everybody have. So one morning, one of the chaps coming from work, a Sunday morning, and at that time, the delivery persons usually put the bread and the milk and everything on the doorway. And those times, bread wasn't wrapped, right? So this was put there. So one of my friends was coming from work on the Sunday morning, and much to his surprise, there was a dog, feet in the air, and having a piddle on the bread. So he went in, when he got in, his first job was to filter the information to everybody. And he says, don't eat that bread this morning. There was a dog out there having a piddle on the bread. So everybody aware of that. So this lady went through her normal task of preparing the breakfast, butter the breads and everything. And when she realized about 10, 11 o'clock, the bread was still standing there. And so she called them together and said, well, what's happened to this bread? Everybody said, well, we don't feel like having any bread this morning. She said, okay. I said, well, I'll tell you a lot then. If you don't eat that bread, by this evening you got to find yourself somewhere to live. At that time you couldn't find nowhere to live. And who has got a room accommodation is chock-a-block. So they finally decided they got to eat the bread. So you can imagine some of the look on their faces when they're going through the bread and just turning up their nose. But eventually they had to eat the bread in order to maintain their accommodation. So that is something I never ever forgot. I always remember, and these are some of the hardships that we had to face.
I say especially my daughter, she went to all white girls grammar school, and I had to do what a mother had to do to protect my daughter, in the sense that I had to speak out for her. I never went to the teachers because they used to write notes and call her black pig and gollywog and why don't you go swing in the trees. And I realized she was being withdrawn. When she came from school, she always ran upstairs to her room. I said, what are you going upstairs for? She said, I just want to do some writing, Mum. And one day I went into the room and there was these piles of notes. And I thought, well, I says, I'll see these children. I said, go see the teacher. She says, no, Mum, because if you saw the teacher, it'll make it worse for me. I said, well, Pippi, I have to do something about it. I just can't let you suffer like this. So I says, okay, then I shan't do anything. But like a good old mother, I asked her the name of the children and she told me. And I went down there to the school about 8:30 in the morning. And I asked the other kids, I said, do you know so-and-so? And so I said, yes. So I said, point her out to me when she came. And I got all them together. And I says, I'm Pauline's mum. And I said, you've been calling her names and telling she's a gollywog and this. I says, why are you doing this? They said, we don't like her because she's the only black one in the school. So I says, okay. I says, this is your blouse because they're wearing nice navy and white. I said, this blouse is white, isn't it? She says, yes. I says, what's the color of your skin? She says, pinky, sort of a pink. I says, okay. I said, have you got a cat at home? She said, yes. I said, have you got a dog? She says, yes. I said, when you go home, you take your hand and you pull away the hair of the dog's skin and the cat, and that's the color of your skin. I says, you say her hair is woolly like a gollywog. I says, have you seen the horse's hair? She says, yes, the tail. I says, that's what your hair is like. And I says, you see she's got a nose, a big flat black nose. I said, have you seen the foul beak? She says, yes. I said, that's what your nose is like. But in a sense, you know, people might say I was racist in doing that to children. But I did that to make people realize, you know, you can always find something about someone that will make them feel bad. You know, and I've always taught my children to be very proud of their color. You know, it can be diluted, but it can't be taken away. You know, and I said, her hair, which you say is woolly, I said, it's like the sheep's hair. I said, you feel mine. And you know, when Pauline had her 21st birthday, 2 of the girls came and she says, Mrs. Bennett, I thank you very much for that lesson you gave us because we've taught our children the same.
As black people wasn't much accepted in the community, see, because and at one occasion I went into a pub to have a drink, and while I was standing at the bar minding my own business, just having my drink, I was approached by a white man ready to fight me. See, I'm looking on his missus, of which I don't know his missus, I don't know. See, I was just having a quiet drink. And then another one come up and said, but he's not doing anything, he's only having a drink, leave him alone. And then, you know, and I just make case, drink up my drink and went.
But I had no choice. And she said to me that, oh, you will be getting, I can't remember, you know, how much money was for training. And I was paid about £5, £6, £7 a week. Went to college, Wilson College, and started my training, leaving my children with my friends. It was the most distressing time in my life. Taking 2 children to school, the youngest to my friend, and then walking all the way to Wilson College. I couldn't afford to go by bus. And in college, whenever I started typing and listening to all the instructions, tears flowing on my cheeks, where did I end up? I was all right, you know, happy teaching in a secondary school, you know, am I going to be a secretary?
Anyway, I said to him, I said, no, you are going to school to learn your lesson. The teachers already have theirs forget about the prejudice and put education into your head. And luckily, thank the Lord, he did hear what I said. And when they went to school, they put him in the backward class. So the teacher said, the first parent evening, I went, and the teacher said, he got a confession to make. So said, yes. He said, when your child Colin came here, we put him in. He said, I'm not saying that it's because of any prejudice, but we think that he was not qualified to go higher. So they put him at the backward class.
So how did you feel about that?
Wait. It never troubled me, because I noticed that he was working hard. And he said, but my confession is, Colin worked from less than 2 weeks. He worked himself to the top of the class. So, and he said to me, the teacher said, if there's anything to do, and Colin want to do, if he want to go to university, whatever thing he want, he will help him.
We contributed to the economy of Wolverhampton in all the industries. We contributed Goodyear factories. Our generation that worked in light engineering, the various component companies that made motorcycles and car components in the Wolverhampton area. We worked there as well. We worked in the dairies. If I remember, Express and Dairy Company, which is quite a big company in Wolverhampton off the Penn Road. We worked on the buses. We worked everywhere where our labour was required. So that's important that we recognise that contribution as well. And also Wolverhampton, the Windrush generation have produced a fantastic offspring of children and grandchildren who have been successful at a national and even international level in sports, particularly at one stage, a lot of the judo team in Britain that represents Great Britain in the various Olympics all came from Wolverhampton, from various clubs, from talking about athletics, talking about entertainment in terms of music, talking about politics, literature, art, creativity as well. So we are proud there were so many of the Windrush generation children and grandchildren who've been successful, and we need to celebrate that because that will inspire the future generation. And that is why the Oral History Project, the BME Oral History Project, is really critical. But the final point I want to add is, when you go to Wolverhampton, can you see the visibility of the contribution of the Windrush generation in terms of the public realm, reflecting in sculptures, monuments, memorials, blue plaques, which denote our contribution. We still have a long way to go, and I hope, as a result of National Windrush Day, the BME project, and the legacy of Paulette Wilson, that we can create a permanent legacy so the Windrush generation are appreciated, and also the children and the grandchildren and the next future generations know that their forebears have contributed to Wolverhampton and making this place as we know it today. So that's why this project, this exhibition in Wolverhampton Art Gallery, is really important to celebrate and to acknowledge, and also to inspire the next generation of the rich history of the Windrush generation in Wolverhampton and other parts of the Black Country as well.